So it's a decent wedding. Oh,
Yes, and here the wedding ceremony is actually taking place, and you can see that the bride is bowing before her husband to be, and then the husband will follow suit and bow to his new bride. So this is a real wedding that's happening.
안녕하세요, 여러분. This is Mark Peterson with the Frog Outside the Well Research Center, and today we're back with my good friend Charles Goldberg. Charles was a Peace Corps volunteer, member of K1, the famous K1, the biggest first Peace Corps group into Korea, and then he went back as an anthropologist and studied in a village which we reported about last time. So if you haven't seen that video, go back and see the report about the village Song.
Songdong-ni.
Say it again.
Songdong-ni.
Songdong-ni, indeed, Songdong-ni. And that was from 74 for a year or two thereafter.
73 to 75. Yeah.
Yeah, yeah. Well, we wanted to follow up with that and do some specific kinds of things. That video introduces Charlie and the village in general terms, which was really interesting. And as an anthropologist, you get into lots of different things. Today, we're going to talk about some spiritual aspects of the village, and specifically, we want to talk about a spirit wedding. How did this come about, Charlie? Why does somebody want to do a spirit wedding?
Well, it was something that was done by a Mudang, by a shaman, somebody that was specially called in for the purpose from outside the village, from not too far away,
Now,
but
you
who
have a shaman in your village, but this one required a specialist
a
outside the village.
specialist. This was a specialist
Wow.
who was supposed to be a particularly good Mudang, someone whose fame had traveled far and wide in that particular region of Chungcheongbukdo. So she was someone that was known about and actually had been called into the village on at least one other occasion. So she was familiar with the village and the people in the village were familiar with her and thought that she was good at what she did. So anyway, this was a problem in which a woman in the village was suffering, had been suffering for some years from tuberculosis and had tried a number of different ways to treat it. None of them had been particularly successful, and she was not in very good shape. And so the Mudang, the shaman was called in to find out what the cause of her illness was and to see if something could be done about it. And so that was the reason for this particular event.
And indeed, the shamans are kind of healers, are they not? They come in to
Oh
help
yes. Oh
trauma.
yes. Oh
Yeah.
yes, that's that in certainly in that part of the country and in the countryside, that's the most common reason for having a shaman come in is to heal somebody who's suffering from some illness or other.
And it can be economic, business failure, and that sort of thing as well.
Well, it can be, although I didn't see anything like that in my village. It was more on the healing side of things.
Uh-huh. Well, people sometimes refer to shamanism as a superstitious practice or whatnot, but it thrives. I see it in Korea today, in
Oh yes.
in urban Korea as well as in rural Korea. And there are certain places where I see it a lot in seaside areas, in the seaport towns. There's lots of shaman activities, and they tend to congregate in neighborhoods. So you can go to neighborhood to find your shaman. And I've taken teacher groups, small groups, two, three at a time, to visit a shaman with people that have had angst of some kind and want to see what the
Hmm.
shaman could do. And I've seen a couple of really remarkable events where the shaman knew immediately what the woman was concerned about, and the shaman knew that. It was quite amazing.
Right.
So let's see. We've got a bunch of slides to show. Let me see if I can load this up.
This is a particular shaman's rite that took place in my village in 1974, and it was a spirit wedding. Okay, I wanted to show this first slide because it's something that you see commonly all around Korea, both urban and rural areas. And this is an effigy made out of straw. You can probably get a pretty good idea of how it's made. It's very crude, very easy to make. It's made out of straw, And during a kut, a shamanic rite is called a kut in Korean. And during a kut, the evil spirit that's causing the illness or causing whatever ill fortune is coming upon the person who is called the kut is driven into this effigy. And then the effigy is taken and it's thrown into a ditch somewhere or thrown into a place where it wouldn't necessarily be found, just basically tossed away. So basically, the evil spirit has been removed from the body of the person who is afflicted and has been thrown away. And
Wow.
this is called in the area where I was living in Chungcheongbukdo, it's called a Subi. Hosoabi is
Oh,
the more
yeah.
general term, but Subi is what it was called.
Yeah, we
And
say hosoabi as a, standard term, right?
yeah, that's more standard, but Subi is a common word that you hear around the area, around the region. And this is a Subi. And so we're going to be seeing more of this as we go on in the slide presentation.
So
Okay,
here's
go ahead.
here's your shaman.
So here's the lady who has been brought in from the outside to cure this woman. We're going to be seeing, actually, you can see the woman sort of off in the background.
Oh, indeed. Yeah, indeed.
You can see her sitting there in the room, and that's Mrs. Hong. And she has been very ill with tuberculosis for a long time and has been called in. The shaman has been called in to determine what is the cause of her illness and to see if what can be done about it.
Tell me
So,
about the tell me
go
about the
ahead.
decision to call her in. She wouldn't sit down and call someone on the phone herself. It's family and relatives, and everybody's concerned. And what can we do?
Right, it's her family that's concerned about her,
Yeah.
uh, and she's agreed to go along with it, and maybe she's wanted it, and so here we are, and we're calling in the Mudang to see if she can help to determine what's going on with this woman and what can be done to help her feel better.
And so here's the start of the ceremony.
So this is kind of the start of the ceremony. We're actually here. We're a couple of hours into the ceremony. The ceremony started around 9 p.m. at night, and for the first couple of hours, the Mudang was connecting with her familiar spirit. Every Mudang has her own spirit in the spirit world that she has a particular connection to.
We call it a tegam in Korean, right?
A take yeah, that's one term that's used, and so this woman had her own familiar spirit, and she started off by chanting over and over again in a very monotonous sort of way, basically going into a trance so that she and her familiar spirit could communicate with each other. And then her familiar spirit, and then you would hear, and I have this on tape actually, you would hear the familiar spirit actually speaking through the tongue, through the voice of the Mudang, and telling the Mudang what's going on.
And
You
this
know, here I
familiar
am. What do you want from me? The Mudang is answering, this is what I want from you. The familiar spirit is saying, okay, well, if you want this from me, then you're going to have to, first of all, you're going to have to be willing to pay. It's going to cost you some money. And she tells the Mudang how much it's going to cost. And then they make sure that everybody is in agreement with that. And then the familiar spirit goes on to talk about how the family has not really been very good at paying attention to the needs of the spirit world, and they need to be better at that. And the Mudang says, what can we do to improve ourselves and to do something about this lady's illness?" And the spirit goes on to tell the lady what the problem is. And the problem is that this woman had a nephew who died at the age of around 18 or 19. I can't remember which. He was a very young man. He died of some sort of illness, and he had died before he could be married. So, and this is a very common thing in if somebody dies before they can be married, then they go into the spirit world unsatisfied because you have to be married in order to go into the spirit world in good shape. And you have to be married and have children if at all possible, because that's all very much in the course of what's normally expected in Korean culture, right?
Right.
Uh, and this has not happened in the case of this particular individual. And instead, he becomes a hungry ghost. He becomes a dissatisfied ghost. And he's haunting his aunt, who has become ill because of the problems, the fact that her nephew has never fulfilled his role in life to be married and to carry on the family line, right?
Right.
So what needs to be done? Well, we need to have a wedding for this man, and we need to have a bride for him. So the Mudang then creates a bride and the groom out of two of these effigies that we looked at the very beginning. She has two effigies, and then she puts clothing on them that are made out of paper, and you can see them in the background. The white one is the clothing of the groom, so that's the groom, and then the chogori, the green chogori that you see in the background, that's the bride, and she has made those wedding costumes for the bride and the groom, and she has also made two slaves, dolls, one for the groom and one for the bride, to take to the afterworld, so that they'll have servants to serve them while they're in the afterlife.
Oh, that really
So
shows the important role of servants in traditional society, doesn't it?
it does, and you can see the altars where the marriage altars. You can see the rice, and you can see another altar also in the background in front of the bride. So that's what we're looking at here. And there's also some wine. You saw the vessel with the wine in it. So this is another view of the same thing. You can see that there are a couple of pieces of fruit there on the altar table. There's a pear and an apple.
So it's a decent wedding. Oh,
Yes, and here the wedding ceremony is actually taking place, and you can see that the bride is bowing before her husband to be, and then the husband will follow suit and bow to his new bride. So this is a real wedding that's happening. And then after the marriage ceremony has taken place, Mudang has picked up the two called momjong, body servants, has picked up the two servants and is waving them over the altar, the marriage altar.
and these slaves will go with these servants.
They will go with the bride and the groom to the afterlife. And here is the sick lady sitting in her house, and the Mudang is waving the two slaves, the two servants that she has created, over the sick woman, as part of to show her, we're sending these two servants along with your nephew and his new bride, so that they can have these servants in the afterworld. Along with all of these, along with that, we're sending cash, and we're sending food, we're sending rice, we're sending grain, we're sending seed that can be planted in the afterlife. So all of these things, so that they can have a prosperous life in the afterworld.
Okay, now did this help the woman? Did she get better temporarily,
Not
or
that I'm aware that she did get better, but
yeah,
it was worth a try.
yeah, indeed. Well, and
And
now,
this ceremony went on until around 3 o'clock in the morning.
wow,
And
wow.
then let me just tell you the end. So at the very end of the ceremony, after it was all done, the Mudang had a big podegi, a big cloth, and she took all of the paraphernalia from the ceremony, the bride and the groom and the servants and the seed and everything that was going to be sent, the two servants, everything that had been incorporated into the ceremony was being put into this big cloth and was being wrapped up. And then it was taken outside the house, and a fire was lit.
Oh my.
and it was thrown on into the flames.
That's how these things got to the spirit world. They turned into
Exactly.
spirit.
They were being sent up to the spirit world in the flames.
Yeah,
Exactly.
indeed.
So
And
that was the end of the ceremony that, as I say, happened around 3 o'clock in the morning. And that was the end of it.
well, I hope it helped the woman.
The head of the Unification Church,
Mm,
Moon Sun Myung,
mm,
who I suppose most people who are watching this video will know about. His second son, whose name was Moon Hung Jin, was killed in an automobile accident. It was in the early 2000s. So what happened after that was that a spirit wedding took place
mm.
between the younger son of Moon San-myung and the daughter, the living daughter, who was a famous ballerina named Park Hun-suk, who was the daughter of Park Bo-hee, who was
Oh,
the right-hand man of Moon San-myung.
yeah,
And
indeed.
they had a spirit wedding
Mm,
between the daughter, who is still alive, obviously, and the dead son. Because if you may recall that part of the cosmology, the theology of the Unification Church had much to do with the importance of marriage.
indeed. Yeah.
All these incredible weddings that they had,
Large groups.
these
Yeah.
huge weddings of thousands of people, arranged marriages,
Yeah.
the
Yeah.
followers of the Unification Church,
Yeah.
because marriage was a very important part of unification theology. Part of the theology was that Jesus Christ had died at an early age before he could get married. What needed to happen was, in order for that to be the culmination of the Jesus's spirit, there needed to be something in the nature of a wedding to take
Yeah.
place. And the couple, Minister Moon Sun-myung and his wife, represented the fulfillment of Jesus's mission on earth.
Yeah. They did things that Jesus himself failed to do. Yeah.
Was unable to do.
Yeah.
So this was the fulfillment, and the marriage ceremony was an important part of that. And of course, that goes back to Confucian ideals. It's
Yeah.
very much a part of that. This is all very much in the idea that a man needs to be married and in order to become an adult. Unmarried males in traditional Korea did not have traditional funerals, nor did women. They had to be married in order to have
Yeah.
a bona fide funeral, in order to be buried. So all of this was very much a part of the Confucian tradition.
Should we look at the Gwangju case?
Yes, in the Gwangju case, here's another instance of two dead souls. A spirit wedding took place in 1983 between two deceased individuals. The man who had participated in the Gwangju uprising and was a part of the demonstrations and was one of the people who had been killed
There's a cemetery full of the dead people, and I assume this picture is at that cemetery.
at that cemetery. Yes, it is in
Yeah.
Gwangju. And the young woman, you see a picture of her as a high school student here, but this was after she graduated from high school. She was an activist working for workers' rights in Gwangju, and she died in 1978. So several years before the young man died. She died of poisoning from a charcoal briquette.
The
Most of your listeners may be familiar with these incidents, not so common in Korea anymore. The old
the
days, when heating was done through yuntan or charcoal briquettes, every once in a while the gas would leak out into the room where somebody was sleeping,
yeah.
and the person would die, carbon monoxide poisoning.
Yeah.
And that's what happened to this young woman.
Mm.
So a spirit wedding was arranged for the bride, the young woman and the young man, in the case of the young woman, years after her death,
Yeah.
to bring them both together and to fulfill their destinies in life and to promote their happiness in the spirit world. So in Korea, what we see is a number of different options. What we saw in the case of the rite that happened in my village was a spirit wedding between an identified young man and a woman, and we don't know who she was.
Yeah,
Know
yeah,
that she was somebody who was from the spirit world,
yeah.
who had been identified by by the Tegam of the Mudang.
Hmm.
And so that's how she came into the picture, but
Yeah.
we don't know who she was. So and that happens often, and that was one way of doing it. And often that would happen in the way that we saw a Mudang would be called in, who
Hmm.
would then call upon her familiar spirit to bring forth a spouse for the hungry ghost.
In the Gwangju case, well, in the Munsamyang, in the Unification Church case, it was a Unification Church ceremony. Who presided over the ceremony at the Gwangju case?
That was done by I think it was by a Buddhist monk. I'm not
Oh, huh.
exactly sure. It could
Well,
be done
and
by a Buddhist monk. It could be done by a Mudang.
yes, and it could be done
Uh,
by a high school teacher or
it
university.
could be done by somebody who's familiar with the Confucian rites.
Yeah,
Um,
wedding ceremonies are not necessarily done by a religious
no,
person.
no, and actually, there's a prescribed liturgy that's written down that goes back many hundreds of years, and there are books of those things, and you can open it up, and there it is. All you need to do is read it, and there's the ceremony for you.
Yeah. Mm.
And then there are ghost stories, all sorts of wonderful ghost stories that you can read or hear about that people will tell at night about these kinds of spirits that are haunting the
Yeah. Yeah.
living souls because they have not been fulfilled in during their lives. So there are many instances of this in Korean culture.
Yeah.
Uh, Although it's not all that common, there isn't very much anthropological literature about this that I'm aware of.
Hmm. Hmm. Well, this has been very interesting, Charlie. What are we going to talk about next time?
Well, what's your pleasure?
Well, you've got so many interesting things, and you've got a reservoir of photographs you want to share with the world, and maybe younger students or scholars would be interested in this. And I'm more than willing to help you on this. So let's get together and do another one next time.
Okay, let's do that. I look forward to that. Nice
Okay,
being with
great.
you again.
Yeah, good to see you again. Thanks
Hope
for
this was
your effort on this.
interesting.
We'll see you all next time.